At a supermarket in the evening, a young man is on his phone, talking to his annoyed wife. He's trying to explain that he didn't mean to almost buy the wrong thing, and that buying a PlayStation was not a bad decision. They couldn't have used the money for relaxation anyway since he was on a work trip. At the checkout, there's a man who looks homeless. He doesn't have enough money. He's 10 rubles short. He tries to convince the cashier, but she won't budge. So, he asks the people in line for help, talking about how this moment might be judged in the future. People react differently. One person even leaves the line. The man then asks a young guy in line for help, suggesting that 10 rubles isn't much for him. A woman behind the young guy gives the man a coin. He thanks her, saying this good deed might make up for any bad things she's done. Then, he surprises everyone by pulling out 50 rubles and paying the cashier. He gives the woman's coin back to her, leaves a 10-ruble coin on the counter, and tells the young guy he might need it someday. The man tells the young guy that he'll have something to think about in the future, maybe even in hell. Then, the man who looks homeless leaves. The young guy pays at the checkout and gives the cashier the 10-ruble coin from the homeless man. After leaving the store, he keeps talking on his phone, trying to explain a business trip and a woman his wife is jealous of. Outside, he sees the same man from before sitting on the curb. He goes over and gives him the coin, saying he doesn't need it. The homeless man asks if the young guy is scared of going to a fiery place after death, and if he believes in God. The young guy says he's not very religious. The homeless man wonders if the young guy thinks life just ends with death. The young guy, who is a mathematician, asks if there's real proof of God. The homeless man says there is a fact that can't be denied. The young guy jokes about it and suggests the homeless man take a break from doing nothing. Suddenly, the homeless man starts crying. The young guy is confused and tries to comfort him, saying he's young and has his whole life ahead to make choices. The homeless man then says something surprising. He claims he saw Jesus because he is the eternal Jew, someone who didn't let Jesus rest at his house when Jesus was carrying his cross. He told Jesus he could rest later, and Jesus agreed but said he'd have to wait for him. The young guy is puzzled and asks if this happened 20 years ago. The homeless man agrees that his story sounds odd. He was shocked at first, but now believes Jesus really existed, even though he can't prove it. He doesn't have any physical evidence like Jesus' clothes or things Jesus used. The young guy accepts that the homeless man might have seen Jesus and asks what he was like. The homeless man says Jesus seemed like a normal person, but looked troubled, and he can't remember his face. The young guy, who remembers every face he's seen, asks for more details. The homeless man explains that Jesus was walking by his house with guards and wanted to rest, but he didn't let Jesus lean on his house because he claimed to be the Son of God, which seemed outrageous. So he told Jesus he could rest later, and God made him wait for Jesus. He admits he didn't know who Jesus really was. The young guy wonders if the homeless man feels bad about not letting Jesus rest. The homeless man suggests that maybe it was all part of God's plan. The young guy asks the homeless man if he tried to fix things, like maybe becoming a priest. The homeless man says he tried many times, but nothing special happened, and he didn't get forgiven. The young guy wonders what else the homeless man has done over the years, like being an immortal killer, which sounds exciting. The homeless man says being immortal isn't fun, like in movies. In real life, he still needs to eat, stay warm, and wait around, which gets boring. He's seen everything and nothing interests him anymore. The young guy asks if he's waiting for something big, like the return of Jesus or the end of the world. The homeless man thinks it could be either, but no one knows when it will happen. The young guy is confused because normal people are scared of dying, but the homeless man, who lives forever, might be different. He asks if the homeless man would survive things like losing a finger or being shot. The homeless man is sure he won't die like that. He's tried to kill himself before, like hanging himself and getting shot, but he always healed. The young guy wonders if the homeless man might just be imagining things. The homeless man shows him marks on his arm that he's made over the years, but he's not sure if they're real or just made up. He even asks the young guy to test it by hurting him, but the young guy doesn't want to do that. The young guy doesn't want to get involved in anything that would require explaining to the police about seeing Jesus and not dying. The homeless man just shrugs, saying, "That's just how things are." As they walk across the parking lot, the young guy asks him about history, like what was happening in the 1st century. The homeless man says life was pretty much the same back then, with shepherds and fishermen doing their jobs. The young guy asks about important events like Jesus' time, church changes, and mysteries. The homeless man wonders how the young guy knows all this, and says he learned it from books too. The young guy recalls where he was in August 2000. The homeless man talks about just living through time, being in different countries, needing basic things like a warm place and food. He says people didn't really notice him being forever young, and he didn't stay in one place for long. He knows old languages, but they're not used anymore. They talk about space. And the homeless man says he's seen weird things but no aliens. The young guy thinks it's a lot for a homeless man to say. The young guy then asks why Jesus would punish the homeless man, expecting Jesus to be forgiving. The homeless man explains that it wasn't Jesus who punished him. He brought it on himself with his own words, and God just made it happen. The real curse, he says, is not waiting for 1,000 years, but staying the same while life goes on. The young guy has a hard time believing all this. The young guy can't believe the homeless man's story. He thinks that if the man has lived so long, he must know a lot, and have met famous people like Michelangelo or Nietzsche. The homeless man asks how anyone can be sure what people will say about someone after they die, like calling them a genius. The young guy then asks what people thought and believed 1,000 years ago. The homeless man says they believed the earth was flat and that God watched from above the clouds. But if God is just watching through our eyes, he's only an observer and can't judge our actions. This means God cares about our actions as much as we do, and if God is in everyone, so is the devil. The young guy jokes about the homeless man's deep thoughts. The homeless man smiles and says that everyone has choices and their own fate, but they can change their fate anytime. He wonders why people still fight over different beliefs. He thinks people should keep their opinions about others' religions to themselves. People find meaning in what's sacred to them, but problems start when they think their beliefs are more important than others. Suddenly, the young guy's wife calls again. He apologizes, saying he got caught up talking to someone interesting. She decides to come over. The young guy goes back and sits with the homeless man. He asks why the man is homeless if he's so smart, and why he doesn't try to change his life. The homeless man says he's living like he's getting ready for a big test, putting off changing his life until later. The young guy feels he's living in a similar way, not wanting to think about death since he's still young. The homeless man tells him that time goes by fast. Before you know it, you're middle-aged, then old, but deep down, every old person still feels young inside. The young guy says he doesn't want to think about getting old or dying. He thinks maybe that's why people made up religions, to believe there's something after death. He jokes that he's been tricked into thinking his friend has lived for 2,000 years. He doesn't think the man is crazy but wonders if he has a special body that heals and regenerates itself. He even thinks maybe scientists could make medicine from his blood. He asks if the homeless man did anything big in his life, like hiding Jews in World War II. The homeless man, who is Jewish, says a Polish family hid him, but they were caught and taken away. That's when he tried to kill himself. The young guy says those were hard times, but the homeless man disagrees, saying times are always the same. The young guy is surprised, pointing out that so much has changed in the world from the Middle Ages to now. The homeless man explains that things change if you notice them every day, like a river that's always moving. But the way the river flows hasn't really changed over the years. It's still the same river. The young guy gets excited and asks the homeless man what he thinks about a tricky question. Can God make a rock that he can't lift? The homeless man explains that this is a mind puzzle. If you don't believe in God and think everything we know comes through our senses, then the idea of God is just in your mind. So, the question of God making a rock he can't lift is also just in your mind. The young guy is confused. If God can't lift the rock, then he's not all-powerful. The homeless man suggests not to make it too complicated in his mind. The young guy wishes he could get some clear answers. The homeless man says he'd like answers too, like what our purpose is, what happens after death, or what we should achieve in life. He asks the young guy what he would do if he lived for 1,000 years. The young guy thinks about it, and the homeless man says he'd just live, nothing more. The young guy wonders how someone can find their true purpose if they live forever. He asks why God created humans if he's real. The homeless man agrees there must be a reason, but he doesn't know it. He says even famous people in history, like Hitler, who had strong beliefs and followers, might not have found their true purpose. He questions if anyone can really find their purpose in life. The homeless man then talks about emotions. He says all emotions come from fear. If you live in fear, you'll be tormented forever, like in hell. But there's also love. In the Bible, it says God is love. To reach heaven, a person needs to find God inside themselves. The young guy asks the homeless man if he is God. The homeless man laughs and says he's hard to predict. Sometimes he's just a homeless man. Other times, like God. He's human. But he believes there's a little bit of God and love in everyone. He thinks God must have had a reason for letting him live so long and wait for the end of the world. There has to be some meaning to it. The homeless man then talks about what the philosopher Plato said. Horses are born and die, but the idea of a horse lives forever. People are the same. They're born and die, but the idea of a human lives on forever. He thinks their meeting isn't special. It's just like meeting the idea of a human, which is everywhere, even in the mirror. People think they're unique, but they're all just examples of the idea of a human. They grow old, and new people come along, just like them. Suddenly, the young guy's phone rings. A woman is walking around his car in the parking lot. He tells her he's with the man who saw Jesus. She thinks he's joking and is upset she drove all the way there for nothing. Then, another man who looks just like the homeless man comes up and yells at him for making him wait. The homeless man goes with him. The young guy is shocked because they look the same. The woman thinks he's lost his mind and drives away. The young guy gets into his car and looks in the mirror, seeing something different in his own eyes.